Welcome back to Normal Island Live. Yes, we are late because I am hosting the show. I am joined today by the wonderful Wills Talks, who is a great American content creator, has previously lived in the UK, and is very versed on all the continents around the world too, and really good on foreign policy. Thank you so much for joining me, Will. How are you doing today?
I'm doing real well. Thank you so much for the intro. Yeah, it's good to be back hearing the English accents. It's been 3 months, and I'm having going through withdrawals. So thank you for having me on.
I'd be going through
Yeah.
withdrawals as well with everything that's going on in America right now, but we
Oh
will
yeah,
actually
hearing an
get
American
there.
accent gives
What was
stress
that?
response. Give it hearing an American accent gives stress response right now. So it's not great.
Yeah, it's all a bit too much, isn't it? But we will get to that when we talk about Nigel Farage and him being in Congress, which is a very interesting story. But first, we will be going through a different story. But today we have obviously coming up the big stories out of the UK. Rayner is out and Labour reshuffles. A fresh start for Labour or more chaos? Tensions rise between Egypt and Israel. Sources say Israel plan to push Palestinians into the Sinai. And Nigel Farage in Congress, did he betray the UK? Now, with story one, the Angela Rayner story is very interesting because there are many people who are trying to defend her and many people trying to attack her. We obviously have the obvious media bias. We've got sorry, something popped up on my screen. It's all good. We have the obvious media bias. We have the bias towards her because of her class, because of her accent, because of her gender, because of the way that she speaks. But it is also a very interesting story. Obviously, the investigation finally came out today to reveal that Angela Rayner did, in fact, receive legal advice twice in the statement that she gave to the person investigating her that she was advised that she could pay the lower rate of stamp duty on the house that she bought in Hove for £800,000. However, they did specifically advise her that because of the complex issues around the trust, which is in her son's name, and how she sold part of her stake in the house in Ashton under Lyne to her son's trust, that she should probably get more expert advice. And she didn't. And that's what's been revealed today, and that's why she has resigned. Now, some people are praising her, saying that it's not a double standard because instead of trying to worm her way out of it, she's just resigned immediately. Many people are saying that it's obviously hypocritical because she is the housing minister. She's supposed to be originally one of the more, center left, left leaning, socialist like Labour leaders. People portrayed her as having three homes, which isn't quite as clear as that, is it? She had a residence that was hers because she's the deputy prime minister. She had the house, which was in the trust under her son's name, which is a co nesting place. And then she bought her home in Hove. So is she a hypocrite? I'd be interested to see what people think about the story in the comments because I really want to talk about this later when we come to the comments. Obviously, she has now resigned, which is going to trigger a leadership election for the deputy leader of the Labour Party because the deputy prime minister does not have to be the deputy leader. We now know that David Lammy has been appointed the deputy prime minister. Will that change in the future? Who knows? But when it comes to the deputy leader election, it's going to be very interesting. Labour have lost 200,000 members in the last 5 years since Keir Starmer has taken over as the leader. And what are the membership going to say to him? Are the people who have already left, are they all the centre left people? Are they all the socialists who've said goodbye and joined the Green Party? Perhaps they're waiting for your party to fully launch off. Or is the membership going to give somebody to Keir Starmer as the deputy leader as a sign of you're doing a good job? It could be very interesting because when you're running as deputy leader, you have to stand out. You have to say what you would potentially do differently, what policies you'd like to put, what influence you're going to have on the party. So if you're running as deputy leader, how do you do that without kind of saying, like, this is what I'm going to do, which might be slightly different? Or will the membership just deliver Keir Starmer somebody, a deputy leader, who is in line with Keir Starmer? Are they going to send a signal that they're happy with him? We'll have to obviously wait and see. But also, as we know, there's been a major reshuffle. Now, I have a little conspiracy about this. I think they only did the reshuffle today to kind of distract away from Angela Rayner's story to kind of flood the headlines along with Reform doing their conference. The news has been very busy today, but let's quickly just go through the reshuffle. So we have David Lammy, who will be Justice Secretary and Deputy Prime Minister. Yvette Cooper will be the Foreign Secretary. Shabana Mahmood will be the Home Secretary. Darren Jones, obviously, we found out earlier this week, will be the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster and retains his new role as the Chief Secretary to the Prime Minister. Steve Reid will be the Housing Secretary. Peter Kye will be Business Secretary. Liz Kendall will be Science Secretary. Emma Reynolds will be the Environment Secretary. Douglas Alexander will be the Scotland Secretary. And Jonathan Reynolds will be the Chief Whip, along with Alan Campbell, who will be the leader of the House of Commons. Okay, Will, let's quickly talk about Angela Rayner first, and we can come to the reshuffle and is Labour doomed? Is this a good fresh start? But What are your thoughts on the whole Rayner house, how it's been covered in the media? Do you think she knowingly, avoided getting expert tax advice, or just thought the original advice that she got, was good enough to potentially just pay the standard amount of tax duty?
Yeah, okay, my immediate starting off, not a huge fan of labor, obviously. We don't love genocide here, right? Like, let me just set out my credentials there. But like immediately, universally, I'm inclined to not presume malice when you could pay to not be demonized by the public. Especially with things like I studied trust law, trusts are complicated. I would have no clue. Like if I'm owed stamp duty immediately, if I don't own the property, if it's in a trust for someone else, I would assume I don't, right? And especially if you don't have a background in law or if you don't have like immediate like context to know it, I would be inclined to not assume malice, right? So yeah, I don't immediately think she said, I don't want to pay $40,000 and I know it's illegal, so I'm going to risk it, you know? Um, yeah, that's my guess. Is they like lawyers are very used to, at least in my experience, in my knowledge, very used to saying this is really complicated. You should get more advice, right? It's kind of a standard legalese to say I don't want to have liability for what's said, so like you get more advice. So I don't like just on how I would read that, I don't think it's damning that she didn't go get expert advice because it's a very, very common thing to do regarding housing. And so, yeah, I think or she's probably stepping down and will be back in 6 months, as all of them do, right? And I'm not inclined to read more into it than what it is. That's my knee jerk reaction.
It's very interesting as well how the whole story's been covered, right? They were, the Daily Mail was covering her as like a property empress. Obviously, we know Angela Rayner has come under lots of attacks just because of who she is, right? We know there's a lot of gender bias in this, a lot of misogyny. There always has been, but Labour now has a pattern of somehow losing or getting rid of women. We had Sue Gray, who was the first person ousted. We all know from the reporting that it was actually Morgan McSweeney, who basically ousted her through a battle at number 10. We had Louise Hay, and it was reported that it was actually Morgan McSweeney again who leaked that she previously had a conviction, which ultimately led to her resigning. We have, what was her name, Tulip Sadiq, but that kind of did seem to be her own fault. It seems to be like the women are covered in controversy, many because people want to oust them. And we know that Morgan McSweeney is wanting to get rid of Angela Rayner for a long time. We know that Keir Starmer and Angela Rayner don't necessarily get along. And obviously, when you add that in with all the media bias, did you see those photos from last week where she was at the beach in Brighton and it's kind of like they're trying to paint her as like the working class common woman? Did you see those photos?
I didn't, but I'm not surprised. I mean, they don't need much to work on to be like against the politics they're against. I don't think anyone's surprised the British media is racist or sexist. Yeah,
Or classist?
or classist, especially like beating her down for like being a human who does things that are fun and enjoyable in life is kind of very classic for the Daily Mail, and it's certainly not unique.
Yeah, I always
Yeah.
think back to as well, like the way women are treated in the media. We can go back to like remember with Diane Abbott. I obviously know you weren't in the UK then, so I don't know if you were too familiar with the case, but someone did a study at one of the big universities or colleges, and they basically analyzed who gets the most hate on Twitter out of everyone in the country. And I think it was something like 50 to 60% of all tweets directed at politicians were just to one woman, Diane Abbott. And you can talk about people who might set themselves up to fail because they might not be very good or very bad. Whatever your opinion on Diane Abbott is, it doesn't really matter. But it does always seem in these cases that like attention is always drawn towards women more. They get criticized differently. And even though people can say she did something wrong, maybe she didn't, maybe she knew what she was doing, maybe she didn't. Ultimately, the way the story has been treated versus somebody like Nigel Farage, who has four houses, we know that this morning the Guardian revealed that I don't know if you saw this story. The Guardian revealed that he is shoveling money from his GB News income into his private company, which gives him a lower tax rate. He put his fourth home in his wife's name to avoid stamp duty. And we have multiple scandals from the past where, especially men, especially more conservative men, have done all sorts of stuff like this. And they do seem to be treated very differently. So this is obviously going to continue, but I want to push you onto the reshuffle. I'm not even going to ask for your opinion on like individuals being moved from this spot to that spot. I just want to talk
Yeah.
about Labour and just the situation that it's in. Obviously they're going up against reform, they're going up against conservatives, they're losing people on the left while they're trying to chase voters on the right. Do you think that a little reshuffle is going to really change much or anything at this point, or do you think that they're
No,
just going to
no, I don't think anyone
continue
cares. I don't
spiraling?
think anyone cares. I think politics nerds care. I think my friends who studied PPA, they care. Literally no one cares. The left cares that they are committing a genocide, right? And
Yeah.
until they stop doing that, you're not going to get our voters back. You will not excite anyone because you have a slightly different tax policy than the right and you have the same foreign policy as the right, right? Like they have gone further right at the very least in certain areas from the previous government. So, like, are you going to win anyone by having different faces on very similar policies or policies that are reshuffled to be pushing down the working class? No, no one cares, right? I think they're doomed. This maybe is my American politics. I become a doomer. I become a doomerist. I think it's gone. And I think the leftists in England have a chance here to take power from Labour and Conservatives and build something better and new that actually challenges it, because the fascists have done it very well, both in America and in England. And I think you're at the point that we were at maybe 20 years ago with the Tea Party,
Mm,
right? You have reform, right, which is doing the thing the Tea Party did, right, and that'll ultimately either push Tories over to the right or kill them, right, in a political sense, guys. Don't I mean I'm not there anymore. The Home Secretary can't get me, but and then it'll like push labor to the right, and so we need something materially, right, that will actually push labor. And I think that looks something like Corbynites, and I think it looks like a groundswell of protests, and that's why they're so terrified of protests that are
mm.
happening.
I think what we need to watch out for as well is, we had 14 years of Tories, which was terrible, but as soon as Labour came in, people seemed to mostly forget about it, besides those people who are very deep into politics, right? We might bring it up all the time, but I still think that 80% of the country still kind of forget about it. And it's almost like very British, or if they keep calm and carry on, we tend to not go back to things and revisit them. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because I do think it's possible that Labour might have a pathway of looking new, but only if they get a new leader. And the only way that new leader could basically push through all the crap is by making it look like it is something new. And that means that instead of, taking over and carrying on what Keir Starmer's doing, they need to go essentially back after the left. Now, I wouldn't forgive anybody in that cabinet at all who came in and was like, right, I'm going to be hard on Israel. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And they actually take action. I'll be happy that they take action. But I think anyone in that cabinet is obviously completely complicit. I think it's a separate conversation about other people in the Labour Party. Perhaps like there are still many good, very good leftists in the Labour Party who are staying within to try and change it. And people can talk about that complicity separately. I don't want to bring up that argument, but anyone in this cabinet is complicit. And I just don't think that any of the really diehard Gaza voters who are really focused on this issue are ever going to come back under anything that looks like anyone in the cabinet. And then on top of that, obviously, because of that, there is obviously a chunk of the Muslim vote that's been lost. They've pushed away a chunk of the LGBTQ vote by throwing trans people under the bus. They would need a very, very strong leader to come in, basically clean the house out, make it all look brand new, just kind of like what happened when Labour came in and everybody forgot about the Tories. If they have that leader, they might have a shot. But is anybody capable of doing that in the Labour Party? I don't think so. They've purged everybody, which is charismatic. They've
Yeah.
gotten rid of like anyone that I would see as a lefty who's like, actually, this person could do a good job. So, do you think it could
Yeah.
work, or do you think they're just doomed anyway?
Look, my once again, my immediate response is I don't want to give the voters too much credit because famously voters are dumb, but like the public is not smart. That's not elitist; it's just a fact about crowds. And so I don't want to give them a lot of credit, but we do need to say voters know no one's perfect. This thing we hear a lot in America, which is liberals yelling at leftists saying there will never be a perfect party, there will never be a perfect person. Everyone in their right mind knows that, right? So I think there is grace and space for tactical politics and effective politics. And so I think if Labor gave and said, "Hey, look, we will not only say we're slightly better than Reform, but we'll give you material, genuine benefits, and you got to stop committing genocide." Anything you do domestically will literally never outweigh a tactical benefit and push towards continuing genocide. But if they do stop doing that, right, and they say, "Oh, that sorry, like we're not going to turn ourselves into the Hague," but like, oops, we don't have to forgive them. It's not ours to forgive, right? Like, I don't know them personally. I'm not in their community, right? But what needs to happen is give us a reason to support you, give us a reason to be excited by you. And first of all, political memory is quite short.
Mm.
Once again, an unfortunate fact about crowds. So regardless, it's not ours to forgive, it's not ours to hate, right? That's for the Palestinian people and those affected by, American and UK imperialism to decide. But you can give material benefits, and if they start doing that, sure, absolutely, we can see it. Like, if people started proposing actually effective policies, I don't think it could die. Or, if they need to rebrand and rename, like, whatever, like, they can do that. But I don't think people are doomed, and quite frankly, I think people have bad memories. So if they start exciting people and getting people involved and mobilized, I don't know why we couldn't save the party. I don't know why we'd want to, but I don't know why. I think it would be possible.
Like, perhaps we're biased, obviously, because we care so much about what's happening to Palestinians and just obviously other issues around the world when it comes to foreign policy, right? Like, I feel like anything that Labour has done so far, almost like not could have been forgiven, but could have been either saved or rebranded if it wasn't for them being complicit in a genocide, right? Like, politicians have been forgiven before for maybe not being the strongest in LGBTQ issues, maybe for cutting a little bit of welfare here and there, maybe for not funding education properly. But I feel like, for me personally, in my lifetime, I've never seen an issue which is so strongly rooted into people's hearts that it's going to make them push away from any politician or any party uh, anywhere in my lifetime. Nothing has, in my opinion, has been so divisive, rightly so. Nothing has been ever been so unforgiving, and rightly so. And I think this is going to be something that's going to be buried into people's memories and mindsets for literal decades to come, especially as Israel continues its assault and its possible escalation into other countries as well. But I just want to quickly move on to the second story so we can actually talk about the ongoing genocide a little bit more and talk about what Israel has now got planned according to some sources. So, Egypt has increasingly been sidelined in Gaza ceasefire talks, with Cairo alarmed that a major Israeli assault could drive Palestinians across the Sinai border, sparking more instability. Now, senior Egyptian intelligence officials told Middle East Eye that communication with Israel has collapsed, leaving the US as Israel's main negotiating partner in Qatar, playing only a marginal role. And despite Hamas accepting the latest ceasefire plan, Israel rejected it, despite earlier approving it. Egyptian sources argue Israel never seriously pursued a truce and that Washington has fully backed Israel's actions. And we all know that's true anyway. Israel has collapsed pretty much every single negotiation and everything that they've had on the table. And we'll come to that, and I'll talk more about that with Will in a second. But President Abdel Fattah el Sisi has ordered Egyptian negotiators to keep working with regional international actors, though recent missions have returned empty handed. Israel's leadership is reportedly eyeing the 7th of October, the second anniversary, obviously, of the ongoing war, genocide, conflict, as a symbolic date to raise the flag over Gaza City. Now, Netanyahu is seeking to restore prestige and is said to prioritize occupying Gaza over rescuing hostages, with US officials also expected to treat captives as expendable. Egyptian intelligence now predicts devastating street battles that could eventually force Israel back to the table, but the war has badly strained Egypt's and Israel's ties. Once they were pretty solid under the 1979 peace treaty, but tensions have sharpened since Israel seized the Philadelphia corridor along the Sinai border in May 2024, which Egypt says violates the treaty. And Cairo also fears Israeli and US attempts to push Palestinians into the Sinai desert, a red line for Egypt's military, which has deployed 40,000 troops to secure the border. Now, reports are saying that Israel may freeze a $35 billion gas deal with Egypt, and it's seen as a political coercion, pressuring Cairo to accept displacement plans it rejects outright. Now, with Israel severely escalating its assault on Gaza City, the current death toll stands at around 63,000 confirmed deaths, with obviously many more missing and many more imprisoned, and who knows what's happening to those people. 346 have so far been killed by starvation and malnutrition, and in and around 1,100 people have been killed while seeking aid. And obviously, we also have hundreds of deaths in the West Bank and hundreds of deaths in Israeli prisons, which are basically concentration camps. If you are held in detention without charges under military rule for months, even years at a time, without legal representation, without any charges against you, that is a concentration camp. And the world continues to do nothing. Now, Will, We know that obviously the history of the Sinai Desert, Israel used to occupy it at one point. They gave it up due to some negotiations that went on decades ago. I can't remember the exact details, but they also believe that's part of Greater Israel too. So, with the plans of potentially pushing Palestinians into the Sinai, where do you think this is going to go from like an international perspective? Because my prediction is they'll just simply get away with it. Because what's Egypt going to do? Shoot Palestinians or push them back in? I can't see how this will turn out.
Well, it depends how long you think the project has left. I don't think Israel's very long on its feet. I think domestically its economy should be failing. The American support will fail. Trump will change his mind at some point because he has no consistent policy goals. And there is a groundswell of domestic and international like resistance effects. So I think the Palestinians can fight back. They fought back before. The issue is Egypt is not our friend. I mean, Egypt recognizes the colonial entity, and it has for the past 50 years. So I don't know if this is like a Egypt. What will Egypt do? Egypt doesn't. I mean, Egypt doesn't want Palestinians there because they can offer effective resistance against Egypt. Egypt doesn't want them there because they're a security threat because they're not Egyptians in Egyptian territory. They threaten the stability of the collaborationist state of Egypt. And so this is part of the greater struggle. Israel's always wanted to put Palestinians in concentration camps. Israel has always kept them in concentration camps. That's what Gaza is. Most Palestinians aren't from Gaza. Very few of them are, right? And so they're already in a concentration camp. This would be just moving them from a concentration camp that Israel thinks they have a really strong right to just maybe a little bit less of a right to in Sinai. And ultimately, this isn't a relocation. They want to slaughter all of them. And so I don't think this is something new. I think the larger focus we put on the collaborationist states' internal politics and the colonies' internal politics, we lose sight of the material fight that this actually is, right? Which is materially, there are things we as Westerners and like international advocates can do to undermine and diminish Israel's power. And I think that is generally the focus. So forgive me for. I guess my answer is I don't really care what Egypt will do because we know they won't be effective resistance. The effective resistance would come from the Palestinian people and their allies outside of Israel. Yeah.
And like so lots of news has come out over the last few days. We've got Finland and Belgium now recognizing or intending to recognize a Palestinian state. We have issues on the Jordan border as well, because obviously the recent comments from Netanyahu about his dreams for a greater Israel. When it comes to like arms sales, when it comes to restrictions on trade, when it comes to all of these things, besides Trump maybe changing his mind because he's so unpredictable and he doesn't like seeing dead children on TV, right? He cares about what's on TV and what people are seeing. Like, despite all of that, what's actually going to actually change the dial here? Is there anything that anybody else, with the exception of America, can actually do to put enough pressure on Israel to change its mind or completely reverse it? Which I just don't see it. But do you see anything else that we can do?
It depends. So it depends the argument. So I think there are a lot of ways we can go about it. Um, from my context, my context is pushing anti-imperialism in America, right? And so that's anti-imperialism on the left and on the right take very different forms, and it's an extraordinarily dangerous game to rely on anti-imperialism from the right, but that is the winning force right now. And so I genuinely think Trump's mind is going, and I think there's a chance he just wakes up one day and is like, I don't want people here anymore. Like, I don't want Americans here anymore. But as long as our lobbyists, etc., have his ear, yeah, he's not changing, or at least the greater apparatus isn't changing. I think what is very possible is the democratic feedback in the European Union and England still exists. So the people still have some amount of say into the government, and they still care a little bit. And so I think if that is leveraged enough, we can at least materially harm Israel, like genuine trade sanctions, removal from free trade, etc. That's being talked about, and that will materially harm them. I think I have no control over this, and I have no context to address it. But China could perfectly well start funding resistance movements in Palestine, and they should. China, Russia, Iran should fund more resistance movements in Palestine because they are the ones with the material ability to do so. There's just nothing us in the West can do to do that except normalize and you know explain why that is necessary and politically efficacious so that it doesn't reach as much Western pushback. So that's what I think the dials that I can point to would look like. So like effective leveraging of anti-imperialism in America, leveraging of liberal sympathies in the EU, and the normalization of funding and integration of resistance movements in Palestine funded by external sources. That would be what I
Yeah,
think of.
Yeah, I think right now, like again, I go back to like the never in my lifetime, right? Again, I'm 32. People are older than me. There are people who lived through the apartheid movement, sorry, the anti-apartheid movement, and other issues as well. But again, just in my lifetime, there's no issue that has ever been this long and this consistent as it should be, of course, right? Like there is nothing that people have cared about for this long. There is nothing that people have protested about for this long in my lifetime, and this is hopefully going to continue. What I would say to anybody watching is just like make sure that at a minimum, just keep on sharing the news, going to protests, carry on, contribute to organizations who are helping exposing war crimes, who are helping fund aid projects, who are helping fund Palestinians, which have been in the news over the last few weeks, to come to other countries because they've earned scholarships. Like everything that we can do to keep these stories in the news. Because again, I don't think I can ever really prove this. Maybe somebody can through some academic study, but when it comes to the like just social media side of things, and I'm going to point to TikTok, and again, I'm completely biased because most of my platform is on TikTok. I feel like if it, and this is not to give us credit, it's about the idea of like decentralization. Like, I don't think if it wasn't for a platform like TikTok, I think this story would get 70% less attention. That's just a number I'm throwing out there, right?
Mhm.
I think people need to understand that because of the decentralization of the news, the fact that we have independent creators out there, the fact that we have people talking about stories that don't even make it into Western media and reaching a wide audience. It's part of the reason why the story is still getting told every single day with everything that's happening. And I think that's it's awful because of what is happening, but I think it's amazing at the same time because it's almost like an anti-imperialist move, right? Like we have control over information, which has its bad bad sides as well, as we know. But this is for me a good side of it that we can tell these stories, which you've done as well with your platform, right?
Yeah, and I've my viewership has like bombed after it. I started, I don't know if you know much about my, like I started off on like kind of milk toast liberal social issues talking about abortion, LGBTQ stuff, which is great and fantastic. But then I switched mainly to talking about Israel and Palestine and anti-imperial struggles, and that was not popular and no one liked it. But you know, it was necessary, and now the context that I work in is that, and the grassroots support is that, and honestly, it's a hard line for anti-fascism in America. If you want to be an anti-fascist activist or doing any anti-fascist work in America, it's going to be really difficult to build community if you don't have a good line on Palestine. And that I guess like within my lifetime, obviously I'm 21, like I don't have a long lifetime, certainly of political activity. But looking back in history, right, we had similar lines. Like Vietnam was this for people, South Africa was this for people. At certain times, Germany was this for people, right? Like we've had groundswells of foreign and domestic policies that have been the defining features of generations, and they have been incredibly important, even to the context of what became institutional politics, right? Like I would say the counter-apartheid movement defined the liberal push of the past like 70 years in America. Um, so yeah, I think if we are going to move forward and if we want hope, because yeah, the big thing I always think back on is if it is hopeless, they all just die. And so I can't in my life believe it is hopeless because I can't deal with that reality as a person. And it's not productive politically to believe that that's true. Right. And so in order to do any effective work to reduce any harm, you have to believe there's something that can be done. And in order to do that, I think learning historical examples, what's actually happened in like apartheid South Africa, how that was fought, how resistance looked there, what happened in Vietnam, how resistance looked there, how America was complicit all throughout the Caribbean, which Trump is going into now as well, how that was resisted and how it was worked against. And that at least brings me and build community locally so that you aren't going through yourself. That's, I think, the most effective thing we can do. Because I have very little faith in the state apparatus of America. I have a little bit of faith of state apparatuses in Europe to at least respond to their people.
Yeah, and regardless of what happens now or next year or in the next 10 years, Israel is only going to continue becoming more radical, right? Like all the data shows that it's more Orthodox people having more and more children, less and less, it's becoming a less secular society. Israel still kind of has mostly a secular grip on many of its institutions, but it's losing that grip massively. Israel is obviously, the Israeli people have become way more radicalized, well, visibly more radicalized, at least anyway, over the last few years. And I can only see it heading in one direction. I understand like the Western propaganda with like the sowing the the seeds of doubt where it's like, oh, Israel's still a democracy, Israel's still this and that. They have some forms of accountability, right? What's that going to look like when you've literally got Ben Gvir becoming a mainstream politician, and then they all become like Ben Gavir, right? That is going to be obviously at a point completely indefensible. What is happening now is completely indefensible, but the propaganda is still working to a certain extent, right? When every politician is like Ben Gavir or another Smotrich, I can't see the project of Israel continuing when it gets to that level where Ben Gavir becomes, when goes from fringe to mainstream to everybody just becomes a Ben Gavir, right?
Yeah, 100%. There are like historical talks of this, like the fascists in to mind, like Germany and Italy, were extraordinarily radical, delusional, and believed what are objectively insane things to believe, right? Like the religion of historical Nazis, or the religion that was built up in that context of like German spiritualism and folklore. Like it is so disconnected from reality, right? That these people cannot be effective strategists, right? And if we go back in history, we saw that they were disconnected from reality. They were driven by absolute nonsense ideology, frankly, because all of them were on a series of substances. But we see a similar type of delusion going on here. Whereas the further extremist you get, when you go so religiously radical and extremist in this context, you fail to be an effective radical. You fail to be effective as politicians, and that's why we always say like liberals are actually some of the best propagators of empire. Is because liberalism is the maintenance. It is the logical, reasonable way to maintain an empire. Right? What happens with fascism is you lose the plot. You forget that actually you want to maintain your power. You don't want just to infinitely expand. And so I do think that is scary because we will see mass escalations quickly, but importantly, it will not. I'm so sorry. They heard scary and heard Siri. Anyway, thank you, Apple. Um, but so we'll see mass escalations. But if you survive those mass escalations, the institutions that built the fascists are destroyed by them, and that gives us an opportunity to create better, different ones that hopefully undermine the rise of fascism. So I agree, that's a moment of hope, not in the short term, but in the long term, that fascists will just fail themselves, which is somewhat true.
Well, yeah, and there's little signs of that as well. I'll quickly add this before I move on to the news story because I don't know if it's made it into Western media yet. But I was looking at the Times of Israel earlier, and MPs, MKs are threatening to sanction the public broadcaster because they were about to release a documentary about the war crimes committed during the Nakba, and the documentary is like ready to go. And stuff like this doesn't often get shown in Israel, right? People get pushed to the fringes of society when they talk about the bad side of the war of independence, as they call it, and they're now going after the public broadcaster, potentially trying to sanction them, trying to stop them. They've already put a bill through months ago to get rid of that public broadcaster because, in the realms of Israel and its media landscape, it does try to remain within within the bounds of Israel an objective news reporter, kind of like the BBC, but has all of its issues. That's not going to the BBC, right? It's still like the most balanced out of the other major media outlets, and that's the same for Israel. And now they're trying to literally end the public broadcaster because they want to publish a documentary which shows war crimes, which is again just a sign that they're descending further and further into what is going to be their own destruction.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
sorry, I ended that like it was a question, but we'll just move on to the next story. But we are going to get onto a more interesting story. It has a bit of fun, it has a bit of ups and downs. We're going to talk about fascism, we're going to talk about free speech, and we're going to talk about hypocrisy. So, as we know, Nigel Farage was in Congress earlier this week, and we didn't cover this story on Wednesday, but I wanted to cover it now. But we've all seen that he testified at Congress with Congressman Jim Jordan. Now, this is the angle that I want to go with this story from because lots of people in the UK don't know who Jim Jordan is. Some of you guys might if you follow US politics. But what kind of frustrated me about this story is the UK media. I feel like they fail to contextualize things a lot of the time with any other story. They fail to say, oh, here's who this Jim Jordan guy is. They just focused on here's this video of Nigel Farage doing this. And it's like, okay, let's add some context. So that's what I'm going to do right now. So Congressman Jim Jordan chairs the House Judiciary Committee and obviously spearheaded this entire hearing entitled it Europe's Threat to American Free Speech and Innovation. And he's focusing a lot on the Online Safety Act. But this all happened before the Online Safety Act even came into until it activated just, months ago, about a month ago now. I forget the timeline. But Jim Jordan invited Nigel Farage to testify last year when they met when Jordan visited the UK. Now, many people say, and I agree, that this entire performance has just been put together and orchestrated to distract from the freedoms that are being attacked in America. And obviously, Nigel Farage is happy to be a puppet. It's a kind of, look over there moment, right? But Trump and his team are cracking down on universities, to law firms. They're cracking down on protests. They're attacking and dismantling parts of the media. Whatever they can get their hands on, they're attacking it. There's hundreds of words that have been banned in the federal government. The word like diversity, and it's an obviously terrifying word. But one aspect of the story that didn't get covered about who is Jim Jordan. Now, Jim Jordan, he's a very controversial politician. And obviously, when we come to chatting with Will in a second, I'm sure he's got a lot to say about him too. But Jim Jordan is the guy who defended Matt Gaetz, who Donald Trump appointed to be his attorney general when he won the election the second time. Matt Gaetz was under investigation for trafficking children, having sex with them, hiring prostitutes, and taking Class A drugs. And I think there was a few other crimes in there as well. Now, the Department of Justice ultimately dropped these charges. We don't know why. But Congress, they decided to investigate, because you can investigate your own congressman. They have subpoena power. They got a hold of everything, did their own investigation, and they were about to release it around the time that Matt Gaetz got nominated to be the attorney general. And Trump knew this. His team knew this. Everybody knew this. Some people who were, MAGA Republicans in Congress knew this was about to happen, and they all defended him, including Jim Jordan. Jim Jordan said it shouldn't be released. He defended Matt Gaetz, and he's still friends with Matt Gaetz today. And we know that Trump actually lost that battle, and the report came out, and ultimately Matt Gaetz stepped aside and didn't take the nomination. But it showed that he literally paid, I believe it was a 17-year-old for sex, which obviously in America is the under the age of consent. It's 16 in the UK, 17 there. Okay, maybe he didn't, have sex with a very, very young child, but he is much, much older than this person, and he was trafficking this person across state lines. They even provided the transactions of him doing this, and Jim Jordan defended that person. Jim Jordan also was one of the people spearheading the campaign to stop Epstein files coming out to protect Donald Trump. He was vehement that this should just be dropped. He helped try and cover it up. And again, that's who Jim Jordan is. And then Jim Jordan is also, he got caught up in a coaching child abuse scandal. Between 1978 and 1996, Dr. Richard Strauss, he was a team physician for a group of athletes, conducted widespread sexual abuse on student athletes. And an independent investigation later found that Strauss abused at least 177 male victims, including 153 student athletes, of which 48 were wrestlers. Now, former wrestlers involved have consistently alleged that Jim Jordan, the assistant wrestling coach at the time, knew of all this conduct but failed to do anything. And then on top of that, Jim Jordan was also deeply involved in the coup to overturn the election results in 2020 in Donald Trump's favor, and was even subpoenaed but failed to comply. He was a key player in all of this. And the reason I'm framing it in this way is because, don't you think it's important that Nigel Farage, who has weaponized immigration, who has moved the Overton window so much, who is demonizing minorities and Muslims and foreigners, about sex crimes, about protecting our women and children, is essentially having a relationship and teaming up with a guy to make the UK look bad, with a guy who has the record of protecting Matt Gaetz, protecting Donald Trump, therefore protecting Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, and also failed to act in this abuse case, which led to a Netflix documentary, which does not make him look any good. And he's still going through certain investigations related to this. And that's the reason why I'm bringing it up in that context, because how good would it be if the media would have framed it in that way? Nigel Farage is teaming up with pedophile defender, but no, they don't even mention who Jim Jordan is. But this is who Nigel Farage is. Like, he was hoping, and he was right, that nobody would talk about who Jim Jordan is. So here I am talking about it. But, let's move on to the quick clip that I chose to show Nigel Farage in Congress being grilled by one of the Democrat congressmen, Jim Raskin. Is that the right name? I didn't write it down. We'll play the tape.
Kindly, Mr. Chairman, and welcome to our witnesses. I imagine that in a hearing about threats to freedom of speech abroad, we might hear from a Russian dissident about Putin's massive violations of political freedom, or the death of Alexei Navalny in prison, or perhaps a Chinese pro-democracy activist about President Xi's attacks on free speech in Hong Kong, Tibet, Xinjiang, or the persecution trial of Jimmy Lai, or maybe a journalist about the Saudi Crown Prince's assassination of Jamal Khashoggi, the Washington Post writer who demanded freedom from religious persecution and oppression in Saudi Arabia. But no, the dictators of the world have got nothing to fear from this hearing. The Republicans called it to attack our democratic allies in Europe. The star witness is not a human rights leader like Navalny, but a far-right, pro-Putin politician who leads the UK Reform Party, a party that has 4 members out of 650 members in the parliament. He calls England an authoritarian regime, while saying that Vladimir Putin is the world leader he admires the most. Well, this hearing mimics Vice President J.D. Vance, who went to the Munich Security Conference in February. In the first 2 minutes of his speech, whitewashed the world's leading autocratic regimes, proclaiming that the threat that worries him is not Russia. It's not China, he said, but rather it's our European allies. Amazing. Republicans are promoting far-right parties in Europe, like Alternative for Deutschland, Reform UK, and Rassemblement National Français, and ignoring massive repression in Russia, China, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, and among all the autocrats of the world. Republicans are vilifying European liberal democracies simply for engaging in the kind of line-drawing exercises that we Americans engage in under our First Amendment with respect to the epidemic of child pornography, protecting children from other harmful content, defamatory speech, online scams and false advertising, and speech inciting riots and imminent lawless action. All forms of speech that the First Amendment does not protect and whose tricky contours must still be drawn by law. We could have a meaningful hearing on this complicated subject, but this hearing is just a drive-by hit against a strong Democratic ally to benefit a Donald Trump sycophant and wannabe. But it's even worse than this. Not only are our colleagues ignoring intensifying repression in the world's dictatorships, they're also trying to distract the world from the attack on freedom taking place right here in America.
Now, I know people already commented saying there was much better clips than that of Farage being, owned or destroyed or whatever you want to call it. I wanted to talk about that one specifically because I wanted to obviously move on to the idea about the decline of free speech, issues that we have in the UK and America, but kind of how America's weaponizing these situations to kind of distract away, which we will come on to in a second. But I want to show the clip as well of what Keir Starmer had to say about Farage going to Congress.
Mr. Speaker, of course, the honourable member for Clacton is not here representing his constituencies in the House that he was elected to. No, he's flown to America to badmouth and talk down our country. And worse than that, Mr. Speaker, if you can believe it, he's gone there to lobby the Americans to impose sanctions on this country which will harm working people. You cannot get more unpatriotic than that. It's a disgrace. Mr. Speaker, on the question of the Online Safety Act, that protects children from material on suicide, on self-harm, and online predators. And Reform say they would scrap it. When their leader was asked, well, what would you replace it with? His answer, there needs to be a tech answer. I don't know what that is. Well, you can't run a country on don't know answers.
Okay, so, Will, I don't really know how to really approach this entire story, right? Because we're in a situation where we've got, this is not just the UK, it's America, it's different parts of the West, right? Where we've got the right wing saying, you're suppressing free speech, we're being oppressed, we're being cancelled, we're being silenced. And then you've got the left actually almost saying the same thing, but for two completely different reasons. We've got Nigel Farage, talking about the Online Safety Act and talking about, Lucy Connolly going to jail for writing a tweet online, which is how they minimize it when she, called for hotels to be burnt down and mass deportation of all those bastards, or a paraphrase of that, something being similar. But then we have to almost like attack Farage and say, everything that you're saying is mostly BS. And then BS is very TikTok live language. Bullshit. I can say bullshit. I'm on YouTube. And then we've got obviously Keir Starmer, attacking him. And I think it wasn't too bad of an attack. But you've got obviously the banning of Palestine action. We've got different types of crackdowns on Palestinian protests. We have the mistreatment of Palestinian protesters. And we have different attacks that are coming towards what could be considered the left. So we're in this weird space, right, where we're both kind of saying free speech, protest, all these freedoms are under attack, but none of us are having the same conversation. And it's just all a bit of a mess right now, isn't it?
Well, it's one of those times where the only real response you can give is you're wrong and I'm right. I mean, yes, there are free speech issues, and I am correct about which ones I am talking about, and you are lying and making shit up and weaponizing the free speech issues that actually exist. And it's really unsatisfying. It would be really nice, right, if we were observing different realities completely and I could just say everything you're saying is wrong or everything you're saying is completely from a right-wing view. But it's not. We're responding to similar issues, which is like liberal democracy responding to the rise of extremism. Extremism in one sense very good, and in another sense not as good, right? We have the fascists on one side and hopefully the rising socialist and communist tides on the other. And they are right. Liberal democracy is working against it. But once again, this isn't new in history. I mean, there's a running trope in history that the CIA is involved in everything in America. But when it's left-wingers, they're killing and undermining the left-wingers, and when it's right-wingers, they're the ones doing it and funding it. And so in a sense, right, when right-wingers come out and say the CIA is doing everything, they're right. It just so happens they're helping them. And by and large, free speech restrictions are against right-wingers or are against left-wingers, and by and large, they are helping the right wing. And they are leveraged disproportionately against people advocating anti-imperial violence or against like anti-imperial violence and not for the people maintaining and supporting the empire. And so, like, for example, the Online Safety Act is horrifying to me because I have seen, right, like limitation on politics that I support and like, and the practical discussion of what we actually do to protect children or what we actually do to protect like very harmful things on the internet that were propagated by like the crypto fascists that I'm working against is being missed because it's being consistently politically leveraged by liberals to undermine other beneficial things. And so it makes it really, really difficult to have this conversation, honestly. And I think the only response is to be somewhat, it sounds childish, but it is effective where it's like, yeah, no, I'm just not agreeing with the fascists because they're wrong and everything they're saying is wrong and they know it's wrong. And the only thing we can say is that they're lying. It's not true that fascists are silenced and thrown in jail in Europe and in America. If they were, AfD wouldn't exist. AfD is a terrorist organization in Germany. Multiple of its chapters have been labeled, right, extremist organizations, and yet they're still running national politics, and they have something like 30% support right now. If it was working, it would have worked, right? It absolutely isn't. So yeah, that's my immediate response is we are talking about the same thing, but them weaponizing what we're observing doesn't really question whether what we're saying is correct. It just makes clear their political aim, which is to muddy the water and to leverage any point of power or populist energy towards fascist aims.
I think where I find myself stuck as well when looking into history, I was recently doing some more reading up on Oswald Mosley and the rise of the British Union of Fascists. Don't worry, I'm not going to test your history on that, but you'll probably recognize this pattern that
Yeah.
part of the project to take down Oswald Mosley and the British Union of Fascists was being able to very easily and quickly compare what he believed, who he associated with, and what his movement was to things that were happening around Europe, from Germany to Italy to Portugal and other places, right? You could literally point and be like, look how horrible this is, look how crap this is, look how crazy this is, look what's happening in those other countries, look at these freedoms, right? But right now, the country to do that with would be America. And I think sometimes journalists, they'll talk about this. They'll be like, Trump's locking up students, he's deporting people having to, wipe their phones before they go into the US, right? But no politicians are saying this because we're subservient to the US, right? Right now, the perfect tactic would be for other Western liberal democracies to attack the rise of fascism, in my opinion, would be that same pattern to say, look what is happening in America. Look at Alligator Alcatraz. Look at the attack on law firms, on media, on everybody else. Look at the people he's firing, right? Targeting women, black women, all of these things, but none of them will because they're scared of what Trump will do. So do you think that's going to harm us, that we won't do that and aren't willing to do that from a political elite perspective? Or do you think we need to find another boogeyman as well to point to?
Well, I think the unfortunate part is the boogeyman that they find is typically racist. I mean, typically, when we think about, especially sexism, if we think about feminism and such, where Nigel Farage is sexist and saying nasty stuff, what will be compared to is Afghanistan or Pakistan or Iran, right? And the focus of oppression of women in those places is never from good faith liberalism. It is very often to justify intervention and attack on them. So no one's questioning bad things are happening there. But when we are talking about that within Western imperial democracy, right, it is leveraged to justify stealing their resources, killing their people, women included. And so the boogeyman we have right now is like, quote unquote, like Sharia law or like Islamists, right? And leftists can't and should not use that boogeyman for our aims. Right? We can't say you're just as bad as Iran because our aim is typically to undermine this kind of mythology that Iran or the Middle East are some magical places where everything horrible ever is happening. And so like the best thing we can do is educate people historically, because historically, there's the phrase liberals are liberals are for every movement except the current one and against every war except the one that's happening right now. And so if they were actually taught the history of the actual wars that actually happened, or the movements that actually happened and truly what they were, right, not a whitewashed horrid version of it, then we could say, look, this is exactly what's happening in the West Bank is literally Bantustans in South Africa. Go up to a random liberal on the street, they will not know the word Bantustan, right? But it is verbatim what they're doing. They're pretty openly doing it. And so we can use historical examples, but yeah, even the memory of the Holocaust is being muddied and undermined and leveraged against us rather than what it should be, which is the strongest anti-fascist memory that we can conceivably leverage. And that's, the internet overusing it as well, but it's also active political aims to undermine and diminish and whitewash the history of the Holocaust and other genocides so that we can't use them and they're actually used to liberal aims. So, yeah.
I almost wish that Hitler didn't call it the the National Socialist, because the word socialist, again, it's being used to reduce history. Reductionists are very big right now, right? They're trying to frame Hitler as a leftist. Some of these crazy far right people who spend too much time online, and it's working with some people. I'm seeing it way more often. So they're trying to, obviously, the people who are pushing that kind of reductionism for history, because that's being pushed because they know it's our weapon against what's happening now and what's happening in the future. So if they can disable the idea of being able to weaponize, Hitler as a tool to say, this is what's happened, this is how it happened, this is the path that it took, here's all the propaganda, right? They're now trying to call him a leftist, and it's very frustrating. But
Yeah,
this is the
they've
reason
always done
why.
that in
Oh, go ahead,
fairness,
sorry.
but they've always done that in fairness. I mean, it was always been a neo-Nazi talking point for the past 40 years. It just so happens those talking points are getting way, way stronger, right? Like
Yeah.
white replacement theory is getting super popular in America. We saw those Afrikaners come over to America, spreading straight up genocidal white replacement theory, and Trump is endorsing it. So it's becoming normalized, and people just don't realize what they're normalizing and engaging in.
Yeah, the word replacement
Yeah.
is very commonplace now in the UK. Mainstream media are using it, from the Telegraph, the Spectator, to the especially GB News, and obviously a lot of these right-wing politicians are using the word replacement. Now, they're not pushing white replacement, but they're using replacement, and people are saying we are being replaced. They don't, obviously the politicians know the history of this and what it means, but people who are then repeating that don't necessarily know that they're repeating Nazi talking points and anti-Semitic conspiracy theories about the Great Replacement theory, but they're obviously still causing the same harm regardless, whether they know it's a specific anti-Semitic conspiracy theory and also just everything that comes with it. But the reason as well why I framed the Jim Jordan story in that way, this is who Jim Jordan is that I feel like if you want to take on a fascist like Farage, or people can argue about whether he's a fascist or not, I don't care. That would be a kind of perfect way to do it. I think it'd be a good slam dunk, but nobody's willing to do it because it would involve attacking Trump, right? You'd have to go after Epstein, you'd have to go after Gates, and you'd have to go after you're aligning with a guy who helped to try and overturn the election and initiate a coup, and none of them are willing to do it. So again, I'm still scared. But the only hope is, I think, that we have, hopefully, Will, I don't know what your opinion is on this, but in theory, Trump shouldn't be in power when we have our next election in the UK. So maybe they can shit talk him a bit more when they're not too scared of him. But who knows if he's going to be there?
We'll see. I mean, I don't know. I in the past few months, my faith in American electoralism has gone down. Maybe Trump won't, but someone else that Peter Thiel supports will. And if Peter Thiel's behind it, I think it's going to be just as nasty and bad. I do, though, I think the hope I have, if I was in England, is Trump is not interested in maintaining the same type of neoliberal American empire that we've had. He has a disdain for Europe, even though Europe is objectively our proxy states, which you should be pandering to if you are an emperor. He has a disdain for the things we control and the power we have, because that's what fascists do. Fascism is the politics of a failing empire, and he's 100% living through that. And so I think America's international power should lower. And it will become in England's material best interest to critique and undermine America if Europe makes a sufficiently powerful bloc in across the world. And so I think that's more so. I don't think fascism in America is falling. I think it'll be in power for at least the next 5 years. I think JD Vance is the next president, quite honestly. He has too much money behind him, and Trump is going to destroy the electoralism. Yeah. Also, you know who Peter Thiel is, surely.
Oh, yeah,
Do
absolutely. I
people?
was just going to mention specifically, like, he's been recently caught up in some Epstein files and drops. He was part of the leaked emails that group leaked that was related to the Israeli prime minister too. So, if any chance, like, I'm actually not hopeful that Epstein's going to bring down Trump. I think it's just an interesting
Mhm.
and fun way to attack him at the moment. I ultimately think it's going to come to nothing, right? They're not actually going to release anything that's going to implicate him. But if he does get taken down by Epstein, I still doubt Peter Thiel's caught up in that too, technically, because his name's part of meeting with his Israeli prime ministers and all that kind of stuff. So maybe Peter Thiel could end with it too, but I'm probably being too hopeful.
Well, look, Peter Thiel should go down anyway. He's like a self-avowed ethno-fascist. But also, I just want to note for, by the way, guys, I mean the United Kingdom. So sorry, I say England colloquially. Fair enough. Fair point. Anyway, just as a quick point, he should be down anyway. His father. So we all know that Elon is a apartheid Barbie.
Hmm.
Uh, Peter Thiel is as well. His father ran a uranium mine in occupied Namibia. Like, these guys are not neo Nazis. They're just fucking Nazis. Anyway, like, this is my frustration: is they didn't go away, they didn't change, denazification didn't happen, and now it's rearing its ugly head back in America. And so I think we need to like actually cow down to, well, I don't know that the fascists will be out of power in the next 5 years, and our planning needs to be leveraging every institution we have to undermine and attack them.
Yeah, and if
Yeah.
anybody wants to just kind of look into Peter Thiel or even just see like a small interview with him, like he's not my he's not my favorite journalist that I'd normally refer people to, but Ross Douthat from the New York Times, he's recently interviewed Peter Thiel, and it's very weird and interesting because Ross Douthat is technically he's a conservative, right? He's a never Trump conservative, but he interviewed him, and it's bizarre. Like, Peter Thiel is just bizarre. I don't know any other way to really describe him. Like, ethno-fascist, you can say that, but I just mean, just
Yeah.
to really sum him up, he's a very strange guy, and the fact that he's pulling the strings behind many scenes is just very weird. It's such a weird. Did you see that interview or any part of it by any chance?
I saw bits of it where they were like, "Do you want a future for the human race?" And he was like, "Eh." He's a transhumanist, guys. We even got to the humanists. But that's a DEI joke for everyone. But no, he follows Curtis Yarvin. There's a really good
Yeah.
series that I will recommend, which is oh god, wait, who did it? Behind the Bastards, which is on Cool Zone Media, which is great. They did a podcast series on Peter Thiel and Curtis Yarvin. And it's terrifying. These people want to destroy the world, and they're very open about it. Yeah, it's really really nasty.
Yeah,
But
that's so strange. Oh, right. Let's move on to the comments. We're gonna go through a few comments. We're gonna bring in the producer, Callum. Let's try and keep this to around 10 minutes,
Hello.
because
10
we don't want we don't
minutes?
we don't
That's
want it. We don't
loads
want
of
it.
time.
There's loads of time.
Loads of time. Yeah, no, that's grand.
No, try and keep it to around 10 minutes because I know people have places to be.
Yeah,
Let's
well,
try and get let's
let's
try and
just
get through what we can.
go through the super chats to begin with then. So we've got Andrina has gifted 5 Turn Left memberships. Thank you very much,
Thank you,
Andrina, for
Andrina.
those. And Jim Speaker's also done the same. You're a legend, Jim. Thank you. And
Thanks, Jim. Always throwing them in.
Natalie has done the same, but gifted 10, which we're also very grateful for.
Thank you very much, Natalie.
We've had a £2 super chat from Tic Tac Music, which is a thank you for giving them the spanner. So you're very welcome, Tic Tac. Welcome to the team. That's YouTube's moderation for anyone that's wondering. Rachel sent $2 with the comment: Trump's cabinet won't let him stop funding Israel. I wanted just quickly to get both of your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think about the people around Trump, and I just think even if he wanted to, I think they would still convince him to keep funding it. When you've got people like Pete Hegseth, writing literal books about how Israel is Christianity's greatest alliance, and we need to wipe Muslims off the earth and stuff like this. I don't know if they would allow him, but Will, what do you think?
yep, I agree. Yeah, given they have a say, they can. But Trump is centralizing power so effectively, and he's willing to throw people off of his cabinet very actively, that once again, maybe I'm a nihilist, maybe I'm traumatized from America, but I think if he really decides something and he really wants to do it, he can do it. And I think this is something that he could wake up one day and do. But I agree with that analysis. If we're going just on material facts, I agree. Materially, the systems are set up such that we will continue funding Israel, but you can't plan for crazy. And I think Trump is just entirely unpredictable to some extent, that he has such centralized power that he could.
Yeah,
And he's he's indicated that type of fascism and that type of centralization in America and outside of our proxy states.
If
So
there's
that's
one
my
Plus, if
take.
he
thing,
did make a move against Israel, it'd be great to see what Mossad's got on Trump, because that would definitely get released
that's
immediately.
true. Be a scandal.
They've
Although
definitely got something on him.
probably nothing that we wouldn't be expecting to see anyway, though. But yeah, if there's one thing that you're able to predict about Donald Trump, it's his ability to be unpredictable. We've got a £10 super chat from Natalie. Thank you so much for that.
Thanks,
we really
Natalie.
appreciate it. And Natalie said, UK trans rights is subject to the feelings of the USA Congress and parliamentary yes men advocate for it. Feelings made law because science destroys fascism and the ruling class won't tolerate that. Just some quick thoughts on that, if you would like to.
I'm just rereading it again. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't read it very well, to be fair. UK trans rights is subject to the feelings of the USA Congress and parliamentary yes men who are advocating for it. Feelings made law because science destroys
Oh,
fascism and the ruling
yeah,
class
I
won't
get what
tolerate
you're
it.
saying. So it's just about the idea of like, oh, this is how I feel about this subject. I
Yes.
don't give a shit about any of the science, what any of the experts say, any of the people who've been working for trans people with decades. Fuck them, and it's just about how I feel. So I'm going to legislate it. I think is kind of what Natalie's getting at.
Yeah.
Will, you want to say anything on that?
Yeah, I mean, trans people have been a scapegoat for the past 150 years. They won't stop being a scapegoat for fascists. That's how I see it in this context. Obviously, they hate trans people because it's a helpful people to hate. It's a small enough minority they could probably wipe them out. They never will be, but it's so it's a great people to hate if you're a fascist and want to redirect energy, and that's what they're doing. So I think they are not just. I kind of agree. I think for the layman, it's about feelings. For the legislator, they know precisely what they're doing if they're an intelligent fascist, which there are plenty of them, and they see trans people as something that triggers a disgust response in some conservatives, and they are leveraging that as much as they conceivably can to get as much control over the populace as they can. And so I think, yeah, I think it's strategic more than it's just feeling. But for most people, yeah, that's
And
what I say.
I think as well, when it comes to like the anti-trans fascists and the TERFs and stuff, which are basically just anti-trans fascists anyway, is that they've managed to dehumanize trans people, and this is just how it always works. Again, it's always through feeling, it's always through emotion or through storytelling, whether that's true or false. And I think one of the only ways to combat it is actually going for the same approach, right? If trans people have been dehumanized in front of the public and the media, the best way to do it is to try and humanize them again by giving the best people platforms from the community, by uplifting those voices and putting a face to the people that they're attacking, and letting them speak for themselves. Because it's great that everybody who supports trans people speaks on their behalf, but just remember to try and uplift as many voices in that community as well as that you can.
Yeah, brilliant. Co-ops has said, I know Jim Jordan is bad, but Lindsey Graham is equally awful.
Go on, Will. It's your country.
Lindsey Graham, all I'll say is there's a certain nickname for Lindsey Graham in DC that I won't repeat on here, but just look up who he is well known amongst, because Lindsey Graham, I won't say he's a gay man, but that doesn't stop him from doing gay things. So Lindsey Graham, from my current residential state, South Carolina, representing the gays in South Carolina very well. I hate that man with a passion. He's evil, but also he is very funny. And he also kind of maybe is going out of this world soon, given his recent pauses when speaking. Oh yeah, Lady G. Anyway, so yeah, they're all evil. Jim Jordan,
What's
I
Lady
will say, I
G?
didn't comment this when I could. Jim Jordan isn't just a yes Trumper. He's like a principled right winger. Insofar as they are principled towards being horrible and racist and evil. Lindsey Graham is a really effective politician because he is entirely unprincipled, but is not giving himself over 100% to Trump. So I actually agree. Lindsey Graham is more awful because he is really effective, and we should be terrified of that.
I think the one moment for Lindsey Graham to like really see who he is, and it's like it's funny because it's hilarious, the moment, the clip, because it's so true. And he said the quiet part out loud when he said the ICC wasn't meant for us, wasn't meant for the West. It's just meant for those, poor countries with mostly brown people or darker skinned people in them. Like, he didn't say it quite like that, but
Yeah.
he did say the ICC is not for us. It's like that just shows you everything that you need to know about somebody
And
like
you know
Lindsey
what?
Graham.
He's right. Like, this is the
Oh, yeah, he's
frustrating
right.
thing. Lindsey Graham is correct and smart because he knows what's happening. He's just smart and evil, right? Like, he's correct. The ICC wasn't made for us. It's frustrating.
Well,
But
yeah,
yeah,
the ICC is pretty much pre-Putin. They've only ever gone after African leaders, right? And I think obviously some like certain ones in the Middle East, but it's mostly African leaders, Christian and Muslim, equally split actually. But even,
100%.
but even still, like they've never got like think of all the war crimes that we've committed since like 2003, I think, when the ICC first like opened.
Mhm.
They've never gone after anybody in the West, really, really. uh,
Yeah, no, very
So
true.
let's move on to the more regular comments. Just to begin with, I saw this at the top of the show and it made me chuckle because we were running slightly late as we do. And Ollie said, delays are due to repeated listening of new viral song Insomnia by Dame Jenkins. It's a brilliant tune and definitely not cringed in any way. Write the theme tune, sing the theme tune.
I bet Will is like, what are you talking about
I
right
did.
now?
I did explain it to him at the beginning. But
Oh, okay,
if
you
you've
did. You
seen,
did.
yeah, if you've seen the clip of Dame Andrea Jenkins in her very sparkly dress singing at Reform Party conference this afternoon, then you know what we're talking about. If you haven't seen it, then you're lucky. On to Angela Rayner. As Shannon has said, it wouldn't surprise me if Starmer and McSweeney were looking for a reason to get rid of Angela Rayner, and she handed them an excuse. Maybe behind the scenes she was pushing back more than we know. I mean, what do you think about that last part of Shannon's comment there? Do we think she was pushing back a bit more than we think, or was she just a sellout to the Starmer and the neoliberal Labour Party?
Well, I think both can be true, right? She could have been pushing back in the back, but that still doesn't forgive her for still being part of that cabinet, right?
Mhm.
I brought that up earlier. Like there are people within the Labour Party, from John McDonnell, good old, like Dem socialists from back in the day. You've got the young ones who've come in who are still trying to change the Labour Party from within. I think it's fruitless, but ultimately, like anyone in the cabinet is complicit. If you were still in the cabinet, you are complicit. So she's complicit. She could have been pushing as much as she wanted to in the background, but she still stayed in that job. Will?
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Like, if you are seeing genocide happening and not breaking the National Secrets Act, like, you're making a choice. And like, there's plenty of information that that would help us undermine this genocide, and you're not releasing it. And you have the privilege that you could leave the country, you could change it, you could change the course of what is happening, and you're choosing not to do it. And I think people personalize and have like parasocial relationships with these politicians. You have to truly not personally care about the person. I don't know them. They're not my friend. I'm not here to forgive them or to like them or to love them or to hate them. They are political tools, right, that we can use or we can throw away, right? And we need to recognize them for the system that they're in. Also, just quick note, last point, someone commented Serbia as an example that the ICC came after. Not true. Unfortunately, the ICC hadn't been founded by that time. It was the ICTY, the International Criminal Tribunal for former Yugoslavia. Minor point, but I'm just an international law nerd. So yeah. Anyway,
Yeah, the ICC was it 2003 or it's around that time.
I don't know. I'm not that much of a nerd.
Early 2000s. That's all I know.
I love that.
Obviously,
I love that. You're an international law nerd. I can't speak, but not that much of a nerd that you don't know that one.
I don't know dates.
But you
What
both
are we
put
doing?
together. You still both know more than I do, so that's fine.
but just with the Morgan McSweeney thing, like, yes, there's been leaks that Morgan McSweeney has obviously led to people getting kicked out of Labour's team. We haven't had any leaks yet that he might be behind this, but it wouldn't surprise me, is all I
Wasn't
say.
he behind Louise Haig as well?
Reportedly, yeah, he was the one who leaked the fact that she had a previous
Allegedly.
conviction.
Just on this point about maybe she was pushing back behind the scenes. Bladi LeBlanc has said, I think Rayner was right to step down, but the main problem is that it'll almost certainly lead to Labour moving even more quickly to the right, if that's possible. Now, I said this myself earlier. My concern about this is that she was, right, she sold out to Starmer and McSweeney, and certainly, as we've already pointed out, was complicit, but she's certainly, for me at least, I see her as sort of the last remaining link to the Corbyn era. Yes, she wasn't like a raving Corbynite in the same way that some of the previous shadow cabinet were, but she was certainly part of that old guard. And I worry that now she's gone, that Labour are going to move even quicker towards the right, like Bladi LeBlanc has said. What are your thoughts on that?
I would just say, obviously, let's just pretend that Morgan McSweeney was behind this or somebody else was, right? There's no competition now to to anybody who is like the right of the blue of the party and the non-blue, right? Like Rain has already historically been seen as like the center left person, like the only one left in the cabinet. Louise Hay used to be, they got rid of her. And she was the only other person who could basically potentially take over And now that's been quelled. There is no chance now. So whoever the people in the background have got planned to replace Starmer, because I am convinced that's what's going to happen, Starmer cannot stay. Like, if they want any chance of even winning or even getting a minority government, someone has to replace Starmer. And the only way to do that and make sure you're in control of that situation is by getting rid of Rayner. But that's all very conspiratorial. But there's obviously lots of proof for those moves happening in the past too.
She could run, though, just hypothetically speaking, if there was a leadership contention, she could put her name in the hat and potentially be elected in by the members.
Yeah.
I mean, the investigation into it did say today that, you know, she is, according to the investigation anyway, she is a woman of integrity. It was just that, you know, they kind of acknowledged that she made a mistake, but on this occasion it did breach the ministerial code. And I mean, we've seen, usually in the Conservative governments, but we've seen ministers or former ministers in the past, you know, resign over much more, you know, much worse things than this, and then come back, you know, in full swing
On the
mere
Conservative
months
side,
later.
maybe. I'm not sure about Labour as much, but
No, very true. But Will, do you have any thoughts on that?
No, I don't know. I don't know Labour politics, to be honest.
That's
Yeah,
fine.
I don't know. She
Well,
seems more left wing. Who knows?
on Labour politics, Edward
so complicit.
Sexby has said Labour is disintegrating. As Zach Polanski said, it needs to be replaced. Speaking of Zach, Jamie's said, I think with Zach winning the Greens leadership as well as the response to your party, that's Jeremy Corbyn's new party with no proper name yet, it's clear that there is a real appetite for left-wing policies and politics in this country right now. The fact that I always like to remind people of is that, you know, historically, I think over the last 100 years, the country as a whole has voted predominantly for left-leaning or centre-left parties in all of our elections, bar I think one or two during the time of Maggie Thatcher. Like, we are a
Yeah, I think
left-leaning
it's one
country.
election in the last 50 years, like, in terms of the vote count, not
Yeah,
outside of our current electoral system. Yeah, it's only one time the right have essentially
yeah.
won in
But
terms of
that's the
vote count.
problem because of
Yeah.
the voting system. You know, it doesn't play that way. Les has said, waste no sympathy for Rayner. It's the old story of a good person falling among the thieves, then becoming a thief.
Yeah, I think she's pretty much done for at this point, to be fair. Like, she already had the media against her for being, you know, the working class gobby northerner, with a bit of a lisp. Like, she, even though she was able to have the platform to fight against that, she no longer has it. I think she's done for, personally, but who knows? Maybe she could make a comeback, but who cares? Like, she's already lost the left, and she is centre left because of her pretty much like throwing LGBTQ people under the bus and not doing anything about Gaza.
What
So
do you both
Yeah,
think about
yeah.
the? Oh, sorry, go on.
Sorry.
No, go on, Will.
I was just going to say, like, you need a base of support to survive that, and you can survive it with the base of support, right? Like the right wingers, like at some points had the media against them, where they had just had their base of support of like racist white men that didn't care what they did. Like, they literally could do anything and they would still be supported because they were so important to their politics. And there are some left wingers that is true for, but if you cross certain policy bounds, you'll just lose support of that. And throwing LGBTQ people and trans people, especially under the bus, simply won't. You'll lose them. Like, we are not interested in defending you anymore. Even though, like, if that policy was different and you were instrumentally helpful, a lot of personal stuff can be overlooked. I'm like a big, like, I don't really care what politicians do, like, personally, like, oh, they were all hypocrites, surprise, surprise. Like, but if they're not instrumentally helpful, yeah, you're not going to get past the personal stuff.
What do you both think of Natalie's comment? Westminster always scapegoats female cabinet members or MPs when it can, as the misogyny is rife within the Wanky Boys Club. Chances are they wanted a reshuffle and Rayner drew the short straw. I mean, there's some truth there, isn't there, in Natalie's comment that, you know, it always seems to be the very vocal women that get ousted first. You know, is it an issue of misogyny, or is it just that she dug her own grave and passed a lie in it?
Just to quickly add in, I can only do one more comment after this. I do apologize, but I'd have to. I have something scheduled. However, it's always the case, right? Isn't it? Like, you know, putting everything that's wrong with Hillary aside and Kamala aside, and any other, obviously, you know, Western liberal woman who's ran for office, is that ultimately there's always going to be like a huge level of misogyny in there, right? It's like when a woman is, you know, standing up and being confident and being passionate about something, they're not. They're, you know, they're angry or emotional, right? It's just the same old story over and over again. And when it comes to those leaders who are women, right, who have quote unquote succeeded measurably. We hate Thatcher, but she succeeded, right? She won 3 elections. That they have to almost like masculinize themselves, right? In many ways. And that's just the same old story over and over again. They have to be seen as like incredibly tough and try to act like, more manly and masculine. And I just don't think that's even going to be a feature of like society that's going to go away really pretty much anytime soon, especially in the UK and probably America as well.
I agree. I like misogyny and classism, etc., and like insofar as classism, racism affects this politic, etc. I think that's a sold story. I think it's very important. I think it's very true. I think what's maybe underlooked is oftentimes these people are promoting the politics that create and maintain these systems in their actions as politicians, and so it's not like they deserve to be a victim of misogyny or patriarchy, etc. But the base that would protect you from these, the base that you could rely on to work against these aims, you double cross, right? And so at a certain point, when you are a liberal party that is building the system that's maintaining and supporting misogyny, and building the system that's maintaining and supporting racism and classism, you cannot undermine, at least internally, those systems if you have the politics that maintain them. And so it's horrible, but change will not happen from simply throwing shit at a wall and nominating more women candidates. Change will happen by having politics that actually changes it and undermines it.
I think my camera either died or it's overheated. Can you
Yeah.
guys hear me?
We can. I was just going to say, I think Lewis's camera is telling us it's time to wrap up there, actually. So
I didn't do that, I promise. I'm
No,
just hoping
it's
that my
fine.
double chin isn't showing from this angle too much. I'm trying to like suck in my double chin.
No, you've only got one. You're all right. But yeah, I think let's leave it there.
Just on that really quickly though, like go find especially when go and look at Hillary and Kamala, right? Like go find them wearing a dress, right? They always have to wear a pantsuit because it's like less feminine. Like there are so many examples of like those moments that you can see in like politics when it comes to women, and how like especially like their PR teams and everything, like how they recommend that they do certain things, and how they advise them how to look, how to talk, how to stand, how to hold their fingers, how to not put their hands on their hips. It goes so much and so deep. And I think the person who will truly break through that in the future is the person who just does not give a fuck, and they just like own who they are. And again, I'm not trying to judge any women for doing this. It's like that they were trying to navigate politics, and they're also like a victim of the system itself, of course. But I feel like there is going to be somebody in the future who will break through all that, hopefully, and just get rid of all this like PR crap about what women can wear in politics, how they can put their hair, how they can stand, how they can, talk in a certain way. I hope that does go away at one point.
Yeah, same.
Oh, Callum's gone. Oh, is Callum gone now?
No, I'm still here. I just had nothing to add.
No, sorry. Okay, I think that's it for comments. This camera angle is not firing, but I just want to say obviously thank you, Callum, as well. Thank you, producer. And Will, thank you so much for joining me today. I love the conversation. Obviously, I would recommend that everybody go and follow Will on his socials. Will, would you like to just drop your social quickly?
Oh my God, my socials are there, if I can figure out how. Anyway, they're Will's Talks on Instagram, Will's Backup on TikTok, and follow my Substack if you're following me anyway, because I'm going to be posting things like this maybe on my Substack. I don't know. We'll see. I need to get people on Substack. So yeah, please go follow that. It's Will's Talks as well. It's the same ad. I'm trying to normalize my ads, so it's all of those. So yeah, thank you so much for having me on. It's always a pleasure. This is my second time on, and I always have time to do this, so feel free. It's always fun. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Will. Thank you very much for joining us. Now, this camera angle is the least flattering camera angle ever. Actually, it's not that bad, actually, though. I think it's the lighting that's making like the shade under my chin, so it doesn't look as actually big as it actually is. So it's not too bad. But thank you so much for joining us today. I'm sorry that my camera has either died or overheated. I need to check into that. And obviously, join us again on Monday for our next show. Big thank you to Callum and Will again, and thank you to everybody who donated. If you would like to support us more, you can go to, I keep wanting to look at the other camera because it's like muscle memory. I keep looking over here. If you want to support us even further, you can go to turnleftmedia.co.uk/support and give us a one-off donation. You can, of course, just be here, leave comments, like the video, share, and do everything that you can do on all the channels that you want to interact with us on. And thank you again for joining us, and we will see everybody else again on Monday. Bye, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Support independent media, support social justice that's there on social media. Thank you. Turn left.